I'm here in front of Independence Hall in Philadelphia. This is where both the Declaration of Independence and the United States Constitution were adopted. One of the founding principles of this country, it's in the First Amendment, is the freedom of religion. And when we talk about religion and death, we know there are many different viewpoints. You're probably familiar with the most popular religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. But there are many other religions here in this country, and we're going to be exploring their views on death. We're going to start with the trip down to New Orleans. New Orleans, the Crescent City. Any sin you can think of, any desire you can dream, you can find it all right here. History too, if you're interested. A curious story is told here about a mysterious woman named Marie Laveau. It's said that one day a rich man came to her, begging her for help. His son was accused of a horrible crime and was certain to hang. All the evidence was against him, but Marie agreed to take the job. She knew she needed great power behind her to accomplish the task, so she came here to St. Louis Cathedral. She knelt before the altar with 3 searing hot peppers in her mouth and stayed there for 3 hours, in agony from the heat of the peppers. She begged the saints and the Loa, the spirits of Voodoo, to help her. When the spirits saw the pain she was willing to go through for a young man she'd never even met, they had pity on her, and they rained their grace and power down on her like fire from heaven. Against the odds, the young man was acquitted. And in gratitude, his father gave Marie a house right here on St. Anne Street, where she lived the rest of her days. There's still plenty of talk about voodoo in the city. Shops in the French Quarter cater to curious tourists with colorful knickknacks. But there's real voodoo in the city as well. To find it, you have to dig a little deeper. Go a little further than the quarter. I promise you, it's worth the trip. Off a small, unremarkable New Orleans street, down an even smaller, but far more remarkable alley, lies the Temple of Sally Ann Glassman. It's a place that can be tricky to find. Once you do, once you knock on that door and go in, you step into another world. And even though you'll step out again at some point, you'll never be quite the same. This is a house of worship, a place where drums call out to ancient spirits at night and even in bright daylight. The promises of amazing secrets hang still unwhispered in the sultry Louisiana air that wafts through this sanctuary. Sally and I have a few things in common. We both revere the Loa, the spirits of Voodoo. Me, I'm just an ordinary follower. Sally, though, is an initiated Mambo. A priestess, if you insist on a Western term. She's upbeat, kind, welcoming, everything a real member of the clergy should be, in my humble opinion. Aside from our belief in Voodoo, Sally and I also share a common frame of reference when it comes to talking about death.
There's a central deity, a God, in Voodoo, but we can't understand God. God is too vast, and the implications of God are too much for us to really be able to work with. Everything in life has balance in Voodoo. The first children of God, we could say, are the Maraso, the sacred twins. And the idea in Voodoo is that things that are opposite are not necessarily in opposition, and they define and reveal one another. So life and death are two different arms of the crossroads. They intersect at a certain point where the living and the dead meet, where our prayers meet spiritual presence, where the visible and the invisible realm of spirit exist, and that point is extremely magical.
When Africans were enslaved and brought to the West, they did everything possible to retain their spiritual beliefs. In places like Haiti and Louisiana, where Catholicism held sway, they were able to hide their beloved spirits, the Loa, behind the facade of saints, who often shared common traits with the Loa. Legba, the owner of the crossroads, became Saint Lazarus, the beggar at the rich man's gate, or Saint Peter, who can open the gate to heaven. Damala, the great spirit in the sky, became Saint Patrick, who is often shown with snakes. And the group of spirits known as the Azilis were equated with various forms of the Virgin Mary. The lovely Azili Frida was seen as Our Lady of Mount Calvary, but she wasn't the only Azili to find a new guise in one of the Blessed Virgin's many forms. Among the spirits of Voodoo who are most significant to me is Azili Danto. Azili Danto is a very powerful, a very strong woman. She's a survivor in every sense of the word. She's a very strong mother. She won't just give you things, she won't spoil you like some of the other spirits might, but if she knows your heart is sincere and if she knows you're working hard, she will always do her utmost to help you. Anyone who thinks that Voodoo is about making a few talismans, lighting a candle here and there, and magically getting whatever you want is dead wrong. There's a reason we say we're working with the spirits.
What happens is that they give you the strength and the creativity and the resilience and the vision to be able to work through it, incorporate that into, your own backbone and your ability to deal with life. I don't think that Voodoo ever makes life easier. Life is hard. And it doesn't matter what your condition in life is, your position in life, it's difficult to be human. We recognize in the Loa our own humanity, our own existence. I always think that slavery is the worst kind of tragedy that can befall humanity. And yet these slaves, in the middle of that horror, had faith in what couldn't be seen right around them. It kept their spirits strong. It meant that they couldn't be broken. It meant that they were able to create this culture of healing, of balance, of beauty, that they could focus on how important each other was and how precious each life was, even though they were a slave. And they couldn't be destroyed because of it. So you can imagine for a slave living on a plantation with a 10-year lifespan and life expectation and the most horrific circumstances imaginable, that life on earth would be pretty rough. And death might allow you to go into that invisible ocean that's more powerful, more beautiful, more full of possibilities, the spiritual home of Guinea, the home of Voodoo. So water is extremely important in Voodoo. I was just talking with a Haitian Mambo who said that she doesn't believe in heaven or hell, she believes in water. And the idea is that there is this invisible ocean that buoys the world, surrounds the world, that contains the world that's within the world that we know and beyond that world. And when we're born, we look out over the mirrored surface of this ocean and our souls are reflected back to us. And when we die, we return to the ocean on Budlow beneath the water. And there we reside with the other spirits that have gone beneath the water.
But that old phrase, dead and gone, doesn't mean anything to those of us who follow Voodoo. Far from it. They're not gone. No, not by a long shot. And once you accept that the dead are just different, not separate, then it's really only a short leap of faith to realize you can still call on them. And they can answer.
I think it's really significantly reassuring to know that the dead are not particularly gone, that we still mourn the loss of a person. We notice they're not here in the physical with us anymore, but maybe they're even more present in other ways. We don't have the body so much dividing us from one another once someone has moved into this ocean of invisible spirit, has returned to Guinea, the spiritual home of Voodoo, and we can continue to call on them. Maybe having gone through that initiation of death, they have a broader, deeper perspective on things than we do. We're so caught up in each individual event in our lives that we can't always see the big picture. And being able to reach in and call on an ancestor who cares about you and who wants to respond to you and is going to give you guidance from this heightened perspective, if you will, is really helpful in our lives, and it's really reassuring. It's palpable evidence that there is something that continues, that our lives aren't just a flash in the pan and then they're gone and it's over and it goes nowhere, but that it actually continues, that there's meaning to what we're going through, and that meaning gets carried over, and the tradition holds with it, and our memory holds with it the essence of what has happened. And it's not over, it's still available to us.
It sounds a little New Age, but these beliefs are ancient. And there's a special group of spirits in Voodoo you won't find in any other religion, the Gede. One of the group of spirits, the Loa, are the Gede. And this is a very unique group of spirits to me. I don't know of any other culture that really has spirits that embrace death. When I see the depictions of the Gede, they're always smiling and laughing. It's a really unique perspective on life and death. Can you just tell us a little about the Gede and who they are and what purpose and role they play in Voodoo?
They play so many subtle roles and such intricate patterns that they play in life that it's interesting to me that on the surface they're so bawdy and badly behaved, and they act so drunk and ridiculous and embarrassing, and they're flagrant and crass and make off-colored jokes, and they're always grinding their hips and embarrassing people, basically. You know, they're the uninvited guest at the party who's just, oh, please go away. But I've seen them play many roles, you know, so their death and their sex and their regeneration, they're kind of perfect for New Orleans. And all of its different aspects and contradictions. They're also the patron of small children, and that I think is a key to their essential meaning, that people who posture in life or presume or think that they're gaining great power in life or prestige or great wealth in life, you know, that great equalizer is going to come sooner or later down the road and bring us back down to that common ground. And what did you do in life that was of value to the world? In what way did you contribute to the positive forward motion of spirit and help the Loa with the progression of the world or not? Well, I think that we're all going to go there. We're all going to find out what that's about. And Voodoo is a way of, or even a technology. To me, it's like quantum physics, that matter behaves differently when you're studying it than when you're not. And matter is not very solid. And things that we think of as in this physical world absolutely are flows of energy. And we can return to that flow of energy, and we can be as comforted there, or maybe more so. Maybe that's a more simple way to be, more direct way to be, and we'll all find out what that's about. And for those of us who have at least tried to live our lives in a positive way, doing the best that we can, which actually I think most people try to be the best person they can be, then there's the sense that you're going to get to dance with the Gede. You're going to be having fun and partying under the water.
For most people, death is an abstract concept. It's an event, something that happens. You can't talk with death, can't reason with it, can't negotiate a deal with it. Or can you? There are those who say, yes, you can do all of those things, and you can get a lot of benefits in return. This isn't just a few people who are a little delusional. We're talking about an actual religion, one which is growing in popularity here in the US, though it didn't start here.
The religion of Santa Muerte, or Holy Death, began in Mexico. On many city streets, you can find shrines to the Bony One, or the Skinny Lady, as she's sometimes called. Yes, this is death represented as a female figure. And while praying to an image like this may seem kind of creepy, those who believe in Santa Muerte say she can work absolute miracles.
By some accounts, Santa Muerte was being worshipped in Mexico back in the 1940s. Now, some academics think her origins lie in ancient Mexico, where the goddess Mictecachuatl ruled the land of the dead. Poor Mictecachuatl had her bony little hands full between the Mayans, the Aztecs, and all the groups that came between. What with the constant warfare and their eccentric little penchant for human sacrifice, they sent plenty of business her way. Fortunately for us, human sacrifice is no longer on the table for devotees of Santa Muerte. To find out what she's up to now, we headed out to Los Angeles. Sunshine, beautiful beaches, lots of happy people. But we're not here for fun. We're here to find out more about Santa Muerte. With everybody so busy enjoying life here, Los Angeles doesn't seem like the place where worshiping death would have any appeal. But like they say, appearances can be deceiving. This is the Temple of Santa Muerte. If you were expecting to find a Gothic castle with gargoyles and coffins, sorry to disappoint you. This looks more like a traditional Catholic church, with one big exception. Aside from the images of angels, the altar, and the pews, there's this. Or should I say them. Everywhere you look, statues of Santa Muerte. The man who runs this house of worship is not what you might expect either. Father Luchino Garcia dresses old school. A long robe known as a cassock, a formal hat known as a beretta, accoutrements that most of his counterparts in the Roman Catholic Church have eschewed. Father Garcia is a quiet but friendly man, engaging, very peaceful, not at all sinister or imposing, even though his church is dedicated to the personification of death. He was very willing to meet with us to explain the Santa Muerte religion. I asked him to begin with the basics and tell us exactly who Santa Muerte is.
She is the angel of death. She was created by God. And most of the churches, like religions, for instance, Catholic religion, they do have saints, but all those saints were born from a man, including Jesus. He was born from a man. Santa Muerte, no. Santa Muerte is created by God. So the job of Santa Muerte, or the work of Santa Muerte from God, is totally different. But at the end, she will come for us by God's order. She will not take your life. God will order. God give you life, and God takes away your life. Meanwhile, as you're in earth, she will grant you favors that you need. If you ask with faith, which is the main word in this all saints and everything. However, Santa Muerte will grant you favors faster than all the saints, including angels or archangels. But she was faster. Besides the faith, because she is in direct treatment with God. She's treating with God every instant. There is no time over there. But for us, yes. And she is with God every instant. And that's what makes her more strong and will grant you favors if you need them. But Santa Muerte is not new. She's been for thousands of years in here. She was created, even the first man was born here. Adam was created, Eve was created, and they disobeyed God in a way. That's when Santa Muerte was created.
After Adam and Eve disobeyed, then Santa Muerte
They disobeyed
came.
God, so that's when God says, okay, wait a minute. She will come for you by the end of your time, when God decides. But if in that period of time of life, of living in earth, if in that period you have faith on her, she will grant you favors. If you are the body of her, she will grant you favors.
She will help.
That's why, yes. In any need, trust me, any need. I mean, it's not that it's not gonna grant you what you want. It's gonna grant you what you need. Sometimes we forget how to ask, and we don't know how to ask. We always pray to God, I don't know, but people pray to God, and they forgot one tiny little thing. After Jesus came, God, Father, gave all the power to the Son, to Jesus, as in heaven as on earth. And we always ask God for favors. He's not going to listen to you. You have to ask Jesus to take that prayer to God. Because he says he's the only one. He's got the power here in heaven as on earth. So whatever you ask in the name of Jesus, and it will be granted. And sometimes we forget how to ask.
What struck me when speaking with Father Garcia is how much of what he said actually supported, rather than contradicted, what I learned from the Bible growing up in a Catholic household. Like me, Father Garcia approaches God in a different way. He believes Santa Muerte has been given the power to grant favors from God himself, the same way I believe the spirits of Voodoo, the Loa, can intercede in earthly affairs with Le Bon Dieu, the good God. For both of us, there is one crucial element.
How strong is your faith? If you have faith, trust me. Like our slogan says, believe in whatever you want to, but make sure in whatever you are believing has all your faith. That's the more powerful thing, word, whatever you want to call it on earth. If you have the faith the size of a mustard seed, you will ask a mountain to move and the mountain will move.
I'll admit, it hadn't occurred to me to pray to an actual personification of death, but Father Garcia has stories of how Santa Muerte interceded with great success in otherwise hopeless situations.
There is a lady with her son 6 months old, and her son was really ill. Took it to one hospital and told, no, there's nothing we can do. To another hospital, there's nothing. Here in LA, okay? And took it to a third hospital, says, well, we'll try to do as much as we can, but he's gonna be dead. There was some infection on the blood or something, and he was 6 months old, so there's nothing they can do about it. She doesn't believe, and she didn't believe in Santa Muerte. However, her parents did. She went over there and says, Dad, can you ask your priest to pray for my son? So when we went inside, the kid was, the little baby was like inert, almost inert. And she was crying, she looked at us, thank you for coming, don't worry about it, it's okay. When we started praying, then we saw Santa Muerte right on a side, and we said, wow, by the baby crib. We said, wow, this is beautiful. And after I thought, well, don't worry, he'll be okay. After we finished praying, so I just moving his chin, said, can you give me a smile? And he did smile. So the mom started crying. He did smile. She said, yes, be careful, don't say anything. And that was it. We were going early in the morning. The doctors came. Says, okay, he's dead. I know the baby. He was gonna die last night. Big surprise. And they did all the steroids possible and take all more blood and check it out. And she called the mother and says, you know what? Science is up to right here. I don't know who do you pray to, but the illness is gone. That infection is gone. I don't know who you pray to, but says, I know who my parents pray to.
While everyone is welcome at services at the Temple of Santa Muerte, Father Garcia has a bit of advice for those who think this is the path they want to follow.
She will find you. You won't find Santa Muerte. If sometimes you will be tired of your religion and you look for something else, something new. Well, my comadre says that Santa Muerte is good. Let me try it. Most of people comes for curiosity. She will look for you. She'll choose you. You don't choose her.
After hearing Morgan talk with Father Garcia, I wanted to get a little deeper into his head. This is a man who found a religion that most people wouldn't even consider following, and he actually became a clergy member. I wanted to know more about why people are attracted to Santa Muerte.
So yeah, people are afraid of death. Most people see it as taboo and they avoid it at every cost. You see it in the media, they like the concept of it, but when they're faced with the reality of death and what it actually involves, they run in fear. Why do you embrace her instead of run like the rest?
Because she chose me.
Because she chose you.
Yeah, now the people is afraid of death because that's what we get teach from our parents. Oh, this is bad, you're gonna die. What is die? Then you won't be living here anymore. And every time we see, especially when we're kids, we see a bone, that's the devil. Oh no, and things like that.
Yeah.
So we are not properly instructed about what is death. Do you know what part of your body makes blood?
No, actually.
What are you inside?
Just a shell, a skeleton, man. Then meat.
Your bones.
Yep.
So bones make blood, and blood is life.
Makes sense, man. It does.
Thank
The
you.
symbology behind
So
that is pretty direct. Yet, like,
Yeah, so
I just-
don't be afraid of it. It's life.
Yeah, man. I
I
mean,
mean,
it's
at the
natural.
end,
it's
it's
the
life.
core of you. You know, it's the structure that makes you who you are.
Exactly.
So, can people of other faiths pray to Santa Muerte? Is that something that you have to kind of, know somebody to get you into the mix and educate you a little bit, or is it something you can just jump right into and just become involved in this?
Right here, I have from different religions people that comes for help because they heard about the brother or the sister or the neighbor that Santa Muerte will grant favors. Even though if some brothers from different religions are really strong and against death, oh, because that's the devil, you worship the devil. But just make him happy. Yes, I am. That's it. Like I say, okay, everything is on the Bible and faith and this and that, but some religions will not teach you how to read the Bible.
Yeah.
For instance, I was born Catholic. Never none of my brothers on Christ teached me about the Bible. Oh, you need to read it like this. And nobody. None of them. Now these days, I think they are doing that. We always do it in here.
Yeah.
We always, and I always encourage all the devotees, please read the Bible. That's the only food for your soul.
I mean, it's good material. There's a lot of good lessons buried down in there. There are.
Any kind of material you need. How many books are in the world? Give me trillions. How many trillions, more or less?
Just quadrillions, man. There are so many
Quadrillions,
books.
okay.
If we've had a thought, it's
but-
been written down.
How many different themes of them? Like history, war. What else? How many? 20, 30, more or less?
Yeah.
Because the rest are going to talk about the same.
Yeah. Just
Okay, every single them you will find it on the Bible. I was once doing a conference. There's one guy who stood up, excuse me, Father, you will never find on the Bible talking about sex. Oh, you need to read the Bible. It does speak about sex also.
So, is there anything you want the public to know about Santa Muerte? Any messages you'd like to get out there?
The only message that she wants you to evolve spiritually. She doesn't want to kill you. She will not take your life away. God takes your life because He gives you life, and He will take your life away. Let me put it a tiny little example. You live in Atlanta, for instance. You're in LA. Your whole life live in LA, but you know that your father lives in Atlanta. You have never met him, but you heard about your father, and then you say one day, you know what? Enough is enough. I'm gonna meet my father, but you don't know where. You don't know where he lives. You take the train, go over there, get to Atlanta. Okay, now where does my father live? It'll be a different story if somebody tell you, don't worry, I'll take you to your father. I know where your father lives. Come with me. Same story. We don't know how to go to God because we are angels with one wing only. We don't have two wings. We have only one wing. And we need somebody else to love, so together in love, walk with God. But unfortunately, the circle of life doesn't meet at the same time. You might go earlier. Your partner might go earlier. So one wing will not take you over there. You can't fly with one wing. So Santa Muerte says, come here.
And she just gives you that little
God,
extra boost.
yeah, God just sent me to pick you up because He needs you now.
Nice. I like that. I like that a lot. That's a very good image.
And also to tell them that they can believe in whatever they want, but just have all your faith in whatever you're believing.
Every religion addresses the big questions of life. Why are we here? How are we supposed to act? What is the meaning of life? And of course, what is the meaning of death? And what happens afterwards? Ah, death. Now that's a big one. Everyone, religious or not, has an opinion on that. But why settle for mere opinion if you can ask an expert? The sorceress Cagliostro and I have been friends for a number of years. She's written 20 books about sorcery and necromancy, as well as collections of short stories, novels, and screenplays. I worked on and contributed to a podcast she hosted. My area of expertise was, of course, voodoo, but now it's her expertise we need.
When we met with her, she had just moved into a new home in a heavily Caribbean area of New York, where lively music filled the air throughout our interview. By the standard definition, a necromancer is someone who summons the dead to get information to foretell the future, or influence the course of events. But there's nothing standard about the sorceress. It's better to let her define herself to avoid any confusion.
I officially call myself the Sorceress Cagliostro, and I use the language after my name of blood sorceress, necromancer in the hands of nine. And my work is multifaceted, but a lot of what I do is I work with the dead. I communicate with the disincarnate. I'm not a medium. I'm a person in the world who has an ability to participate with them, and they seem to have an understanding of my agreement that I'm in service to them. And it is part of every day of my life to have these communications. They are everywhere all the time. I say to people sometimes, you could be walking down the street and you don't know if that person over there is alive or not. We don't always know. I've had experiences where I found out later in the interaction that that person was not a living person.
How does this process work? How does it happen? Are you born with a talent of some sort, or does this something anybody could do?
I don't know, and you know, you've known me for a while, and you know that I always say what I don't know. I don't know if everyone's born with it and some people shut it down, or if some of us are born with more of a proclivity to have that communication open. And so to be in service to them in this way comes naturally to me, which is why it's not easy for me to teach. I do teach it. I work with people to try to get them open to see it and hear and not shut down. But I've been doing this my whole life. I was one of those children, you know, with the imaginary friends that turned out to be not so imaginary. So for me, it's been organic from the very beginning.
A common perception of necromancers is that they're in league with the devil. But here's the catch. The sorceress doesn't bow down to any deities, or anyone else for that matter.
I'm completely on the record that I believe in nothing. There's no divinities, there's no deities in my life. I'm not attached to any religion. Dedicating your life to a belief of something that you cannot prove to me is just insane, and it's a waste of the human experience. I consider the whole God complex, the whole thing, the idea that there are gods, the idea that there are divinities or deities, as floating genies, things people make up to allow themselves to either focus somewhere, or not take responsibility, or give away their achievements to a third party.
When someone dies, that event happens. It's a transition. What does the transition involve, and what comes right after that death?
Well, I can tell you what they've told me. I ask a couple of questions on a regular basis. I say, where are you? And more often than not, they say here. They don't say there's not somewhere else. I say, where are you when I'm not speaking to you? And they say things like observing something or talking to someone. There seems to be an entire lifestyle that goes on amongst the dead. But I don't think they go anywhere. I think they go through a transition, and I ask them about that transition all the time. Few of them have very many memories of it. They say, I was there, and now I'm here like this. And they tend to not be damaged or broken. They tend to be concerned about what we're feeling, but they don't seem to be lost.
If that idea that there's nothing beyond this world is unsettling to you, the sorceress says it can be far worse for the disincarnate who are expecting something quite different after death.
For 6 months, I saw a woman kneeling in front of me, not kneeling to me, just kneeling there, wherever there is, in the habit that a nun wears. And the more conservative ones, I would say maybe even before 1950. And for 6 months, she fell to her knees and cried. And I saw this. And I kept trying to talk to her, and she would not respond. I got the sensation she knew I was there. So one day I said to her, if you don't explain this to me, I cannot have this experience any longer, because I find it frustrating. And in that time, she stayed very quiet. She stopped crying, and she looked at me and she said, I wasted everything. And I said, what do you mean you wasted everything? She said, there's all the things they told me were going to happen didn't. There's nothing. I'm just still here. And I think she was expressing to me her religious perspective. And I didn't ever see her again after that.
Communicating with the disincarnate is one thing, but another aspect of necromancy goes further, bringing them back to life. We're not talking about zombies or horror stories. The sorceress says this isn't fiction.
Corporal necromancy is a very narrow corridor in the work of necromancy. Now, when I say the work of necromancy, I'm not talking about people who are sort of interested and look it up on the internet. And people whose life work, like mine, it is to understand the experience of death. Because I would say if you really look at my life's work, it comes down, if I had to say one thing, it comes down to that. And corporal necromancy is grabbing the life force and putting it back in the body. And it's doable. And there is definitely a requirement that has something to do with how long a person has been dead, the condition of the body, and again, you'll get letters. But it is doable.
Morgan is our go-to guy for all things related to the spiritual and the occult. I'm more science-minded, and as it turns out, so is the sorceress. Sorceress, you've said in many, many times that it's all physics. And what did you mean by that? What is all physics in your sorcery?
Well, that's all there is physics.
Okay.
There isn't anything else. I talk about energy, and I'm very careful to use language that is not fluffy and
Foo-foo, I know what you're saying.
And all, like I make fun of the white lighters because that is not a real thing. That might be a state of mind, but it's not a real thing. So when we talk about physics, I say to people, when they say to me, where's the energy? How do I get the energy? And I say to them, you don't store energy, you use the energy. And I always use this example. I say, if I told you to stand in a pool with the water over your head, and I asked you where the water was, you could find it, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I say energy is the same thing. Right now, you're standing in the energy. There is movement, molecular movement, everywhere around you. And that's what we're using.
So in a lot of your work, people have the imagery of candlelit rooms and statues and whatnot, skeletons. But in actuality, you use a lot of scientific method. You use magnets and other tools. Can you walk me through some of those tools you use and how you use them?
I buy my magnets from medical supply houses because MRI magnets are stronger, more powerful. Not more powerful in the state of how I feel about them, but they just are.
In a measurable way?
Yeah, in a measurable way, absolutely. I use iron because it is the object that magnets are pulling towards, which means somewhere in between that magnet and this piece of iron, I have an opportunity to work with some verifiable, powerful, measurable attraction, or the opposite of attraction.
Yeah.
So all that goes on.
The sorceress showed me how she works with iron and magnets and some other tools, not just for necromancy, but for other forms of sorcery.
This is an iron ring with heavy MRI magnets in it. I use this to focus on the polarities, to bring things in from directions. In my work, I define polarities a little differently than you hear in other paths. The east speeds things up, because that's what it's shown me. The north pulls things towards me. The south separates me from things that I desire separation from. And the west does an interesting thing called working in appropriate timing, which taps into your own ability to understand how things are moving.
Okay.
So this is a representation of directional sorcery and the use of magnets in that.
One of your themes that I've realized now that we've hung out for a while is magnets.
Yes.
And I see that this is playing a large portion of your altar
Big part
here.
of what I do.
So I also see the black mirror. What would you say that's for?
People use black mirrors for scrying. I don't subscribe specifically to scrying because it has, and I have written about it, it is useful. It's creating a black surface so that your eye is not trying to fill in the blanks.
Okay.
When people are trying to communicate with the disincarnate or see them, or see other entities in their space, there could be demons, there could be blocks of energy that just create some sort of appearance. These particular types of surfaces take away that ability for us to fill in the blanks. They're very useful that way.
When you say demon, do you mean a evil spirit or a person that's gone to an evil place?
Absolutely not. It's neither of those things. A demon is an amalgam of energy
Okay.
that comes from anxiety, sorrow, the things that human beings want to throw off.
Okay, so it's just a
Yeah.
grouping of that
Yeah.
that style
You'll
of
see-
energy.
You'll see if you're in a plane crash site or you go somewhere where there's a lot of death or a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety, you'll see the formations of these areas where you'll see maybe a blackness or what looks like dust, and this is how demons are formed. Well, death is, of course, unavoidable, and everyone knows that. But the moment that you get in an acceptance of that, all kinds of things happen that are really profound. You get more involved in your life, and all that happens. But the truth is that you become a full human being. Once you understand that you're going to transition into another option, and it's not over, then you can understand that life does not have this sort of cutoff point. And there's a profound beauty and truth in that. So once you let go of that fear and that trepidation, you can allow yourself to open all kinds of portals to things in your life. And I'm not trying to sound like esoteric and, there's no white light nonsense in my life. I don't have any of that business. I don't even know what that is, because life to me is data. And the data suggests quite strongly that there's more.
There are 7.5 billion people in the world right now. Our individual stay here will be very brief. In cosmic terms, we're literally in and out of the revolving door of life in less than the blink of an eye. With lives so short, it's very easy to take the Earth itself, not to mention the universe, for granted. They seem eternal, but nothing lasts forever. One day, all this will be very, very different. What will the end of the universe look like? Can we even say there will be an end? To understand that, you have to look at how it all began. Just under 14 billion years ago, it all began with a bang, the Big Bang. Everything in our known universe was hurled outward in all directions from a single compact point. Fast forward some 9 billion years and our sun was born. The sun is burned constantly during the time it's taken for our solar system to evolve, but thanks to a simple trick of motion and placement, it hasn't always appeared that way for those watching from Earth. Millions of people across the US stopped what they were doing to observe the most recent solar eclipse. The overall mood? Excitement and wonder. It's a far cry from what the ancient people felt when they saw an eclipse. For them, it must have been terrifying. The sun, the source of light and life, was slowly disappearing as if being consumed by a gigantic monster. Eventually, some civilizations realized the eclipse happened on a periodic scale, and that those events could be predicted. The irony is, the fears of the earlier people are not far off from the mark. One day our sun will grow cold and dark, but by then, the Earth itself and everything on it will be just a distant memory.
5 billion years from now, the sun is going to run out of hydrogen to burn near its core, and it's going to expand, and it's going to become a red giant star. The Earth is going to be inside of this star, so the Earth is going to be gone in about 5 billion years. It will go through a few more stages, and then it will slough off some of its exterior, and then it's going to contract into a white dwarf star about the size of planet Earth, and it will remain in that state for about 10 billion years, and then it will become a black dwarf.
A black dwarf is essentially a dead star. It no longer emits any significant heat or light. Eventually, it too will degrade, and the remnants of our former sun will be swept away into the interstellar medium. Elsewhere in the universe, other stars will be undergoing their own deaths, and like humans, they will die in a variety of ways.
So our Milky Way galaxy is composed of mostly red stars, red dwarf stars. About 75% of all stars fall into that category. These red dwarf stars are smaller than our sun. They're not very bright, and we can't see most of them with the unaided eye from Earth. So what's left are very large stars, red giants, blue giants. Okay. These stars, they burn very hot, very bright. They make heavier elements in their core than the smaller stars, but they have a very short life. Okay, so if a star is much more massive than our sun, instead of the fusion process stopping and then the star collapsing into a smaller star, what happens is that the star will keep on fusing heavier and heavier elements. So it can fuse elements all the way up to iron. Once a star starts fusing iron, it stalls. So the core collapses, the star collapses, and then it rebounds outward into a supernova.
Like people, stars are finite entities. We have a process for producing more people. Stars come into existence too, but like people, only under the right circumstances. It's not a conscious decision the way it is with humans.
The only new stars that we'll get are from material that comes from a supernova, which is a rare occurrence, or gas and dust that's present in our galaxy. The gas and dust, when it contracts due to gravity, it can form new stars. So we have about 20% of our original hydrogen left in the galaxy, so we're running out of material for new star formation. When supernovas are no longer, and when we've used all of the gas and dust that are available in all of the galaxies for new star formation, that will mark the end of star formation.
Scientists debated for a while about what would eventually happen to the universe as a whole. Some thought that the mass of the universe would eventually stop the outward movement created by the Big Bang and cause it to collapse back on itself. But newer theories suggest that the universe will keep moving outward, keep moving further and further apart. Does that mean that eventually everything will be so far apart from everything else that it will essentially be isolated?
Cosmological expansion is the expansion of the universe. So if we look at the entire universe, we see that everything tends to accelerate away from everything else. But the exception is things that are gravitationally bound. Groups of galaxies will become further apart from each other, but the galaxies will remain intact. But the galaxies will become dimmer in trillions of years because of a lack of stars. But our universe has undergone several epochs where the nature of matter and physics have changed. So unless we are going into a new epoch where new things happen, we're looking at an eventual darkening of the universe. But all the matter will still be there. We will have the same amount of matter and energy as we started with.
As with everything, there's always a but. This but, admittedly, is very theoretical. If the theory pans out, we will indeed be living in a very different universe.
According to grand unified theory, there's a point where protons will decay into leptons in energy or radiation. So nothing is going to last forever. We'll reach a point where matter energy takes on different structure, different forms. According to thermodynamics, the second law states that the universe tends towards entropy. It tends towards decay, failure. So things don't become more ordered. They become less ordered, and therefore eventually everything will fall apart.
Eventually takes a long time. We can put it in words by saying trillions of years, but what does that mean? Consider that our universe's history can only be measured in billions of years. The history of humans as we know them, only in terms of thousands of years. The core of astronomy and all the other sciences is to keep building on what we've learned, rather than reaching an arbitrary stopping point and calling it quits. When it comes to learning about our universe, we haven't even begun to scratch the surface.
Of the entire universe, of all the matter and energy in the universe, we can only observe a couple % of it all. The majority of it is dark energy. Dark energy is the force that's causing everything to move apart from each other and accelerate as it does so. We have no concept of what this energy is, what drives this force, how it works. All we can do is observe the product of it. It's just moving everything apart. We have no idea about the nature of the universe, except for the small sliver of it that we can actually observe with our senses. And in fact, there was a time in the universe where it accelerated at a much faster rate than it does now. So there are reaches of our universe that light has not had time to travel from to get to us, so we can observe it in any way. So our observable universe is smaller than our actual universe. And we're not even sure how much smaller it is.
Okay, this may look like the second act at a 5-year-old's birthday party, but this playful, silly-looking guy is actually a perfect illustration of how one of the world's oldest religions views life and death. This is a snow lion. He's meant to remind you that you should be joyful in everything you do. The guys in the snow lion costume, as well as the backup group here, are Tibetan Buddhist monks. It's not all fun and games, though. The monks have just spent hours beginning a sand mandala, a symbolic representation of a sacred space in the universe ruled by Tara, an enlightened being who remains in the physical world to help us less enlightened people. They'll spend days completing it, painstakingly grinding marble by hand while chanting, only to sweep it away to remind us that everything in this world is impermanent.
For many people in the US, Buddhism is one of those in-between religions. Not really dangerous, kind of cool if you like a lot of incense, but a little more out there than Sunday services followed by coffee and muffins. Tibetan Buddhism is just one branch of Buddhism that's practiced in the US.
The exotic chanting, the elaborate symbolism, and not to mention the men in colorful robes may make a few people take a step back.
But we are taking a step forward, with gifts in hand no less. This is Venerable Tsering Phuntsok, a Tibetan monk who spends part of his time working with universities here in the US. By the way, he's not rejecting our gifts. Those white scars we gave him are called katas, and are offered as a sign of respect to teachers like Tsering. They are given back to the giver as a blessing, kind of a Tibetan back at ya.
So, death in Buddhism is part of the life, and we get birth, and no one can deny the death. We all have a death, and during your lifetime, we actually meditate about the death before you die. And Buddha told disciples to remember your own death every second. That's the greatest meditation in Buddhist tradition. And death is like a moving from one house to another. Consciousness leaves the body, one body and goes to another form. Not necessarily human being, but it can also go to animals, insects, the birds. That's what Buddha says.
This is definitely not a typical interview. We're sitting with a man from halfway around the world who has literally spent his entire life contemplating the meaning of life. Of course, this also includes coming face to face with the meaning of death. So after the customary pleasantries, he gets right down to business.
According to our traditions, when person die, we do phowa. P-H-O-W-A. Phowa means to transfer or liberate the consciousness from the crown chakra. So the person who is going to die, they can, if they have a training before the death and during the death, they can practice, they can bring this practice to release the consciousness from the crown chakra, so the birth would be better or go to enlightenment. When person die after 5-10 minutes, when body is still warm, and that means the consciousness is still inside. Only his brain is dead, but consciousness is still inside.
By now you may be thinking that the poor dead person needs an instruction manual. Guess what? There is one. It's called the Bardo Todo, in the West, the Tibetan Book of the Dead. You can study it before you die, but monks will recite certain passages from it after you die to explain what you may be experiencing. Some of it can be pretty rough. Some of it can be very enticing. This guided tour ensures you don't get trapped by delusions, things that could lead you astray into a lower rebirth. This can go on for weeks. Why? Because in Tibet, when you die, you aren't necessarily dead, just somewhat dead.
Is there a specific way that you prepare the body after they've passed through the crown chakra onto the next stage of life?
We try to keep body at least 3 days. We don't cremate as soon as person die. The reason why we do it, because subtler consciousness remains inside the body for 3 days. That's why we don't cremate as soon as person die. And we try to keep at home. If person dies in the hospital, we try to bring at home and keep. So during the death is the best time to realize yourself who you are, through the training. The reason why it is best time is that your 5 senses are blocked, right? Only subtler mind is inside and remains the little heat center of your heart. That means person is still meditating and no one can touch the person.
You heard him right. Theoretically, some respected practitioners might not get touched for up to a year because they could still actually be meditating before going to the next life. And that's where things get really interesting. Searing told us you could come back as an animal or an insect. Is that because you're bad or being punished? That's a big one for the people in the West, the idea that someone else is going to decide our ultimate fate.
May I ask, what role does karma play in how a person will come back? Does karma influence what reincarnation they may have, what next life they may have?
Is there judgment involved?
It's totally dependent to his own actions. Your karma, whether it is positive or negative, will follow like a shadow. So wherever we go, shadow is always there, but sometimes you don't see. So whether positive or negative karma you accumulate during your lifetime, it will follow you. So positive karma has a big impact to have a peaceful death and also better rebirth. If you have a more negative karma, you have a also kind of a hard death, and after that also you have a hard life.
Is there any state like that in Tibetan Buddhism that would be similar to hell in the West?
The heaven and hell, in the deeper explanation of the Buddha's teaching, heaven and hell is here in the mind. It's all projected, and because of the projection you suffer. Till you rid of your afflictive emotions, delusions, the root which is ignorance, till you rid of the ignorance from the root, you will be getting rebirth by the force of your delusions. No choice. But you don't want to get birth, but you are forced. Right?
So, if I understand correctly, it sounds to me that you live your life again and again until you get it right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then that's and until you realize yourself as a Buddha, until you rid of all the negative emotions, afflictive emotions, sometimes we call delusions, till then we will always get birth, sometimes animals, sometimes human being, sometimes we are just in the middle state as a ghost and spirit. So you don't need to go to another realm. In Buddhism, there is no another realm. This is heaven for you once you recognize your own nature of mind. There is no afflictive emotions. There is no ignorance. There is no projections. Then this is the heaven.
The interesting thing about Buddhism is that it doesn't really have a savior per se, just a teacher. Buddha was born a human, just like you and me. He was a prince, which sounds like a pretty good birth to most of us. But he walked away from it all when he realized that all his wealth wouldn't help him save himself or his loved ones from suffering. So he meditated for years and finally realized the key to ending suffering is to rid yourself of attachments. He did it, so can everyone else.
Yes. The purpose of reaching enlightenment is to not just for self-liberation. From the beginning of your practice, your wish is that to benefit all sentient beings. You want to show the right path. You want to help them to reduce their delusions so they can find the right path, to know themselves, so they can find the peace.
It seems like a great culture you're part of, a great religion, if you like that word. I really enjoyed hearing about this, and I see a lot of this in our culture, but it's very watered down and hidden within other things. So to see it in its purest form is very enjoyable, and I really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you so much.
This has been a great honor for me as well.
Me too.
So I would like to close with a small prayer that I learned.
Okay.
Okay.
Please.
May all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all beings be free of suffering and the causes of suffering. May all beings enjoy the great enlightenment which is free of suffering. May all beings enjoy the great equanimity free of passion, aggression, and prejudice.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
A religion that makes you think about everyone else's benefit along with your own. A religion where dancing snow lions are just as important as elaborate rituals.
A religion that teaches you to see yourself and everyone else as fine just the way they are. Because ultimately, all of us are Buddha. With all of its precision, even science can't give us definitive answers about everything that is in the here and now, or what may be in the distant future, let alone what happens to us when we leave this mortal coil. Religion, too, can't offer us definitive answers, only guesses which we can choose to believe or not. Do we go on to some afterlife? Do we return again and again until we've perfected our wisdom and earned a right to move on to a different level? Or do we simply remain here, in a different state, remembering what it was like to be alive? With death, the possibilities are endless. The certainties are few. The only certainty for all of us is that one day we'll have to walk through a door with no way of knowing what, if anything, is on the other side. What will you do with that understanding?